today, but to share with you best practices that we gained over the years in order to be both ambitious and pragmatic with learning impact measurement. So that will be the topic of today. First, why is it so difficult to focus on learning impact? Because we all talk about it, we know it's very important, I'm sure all of you are aware of the Pragmatic scale and the other methods of measuring the impact. Still, when we look at what people do on this matter, it's not that much. And I believe that there is a reason, is because of the workload and the type of activity that L&D departments have. And after one program, there is always another program. And so focusing on the impact is a big challenge on this context. To say it otherwise, if we look at three types of people in the world, I will look at the brain of one accountant, one consultant, and one learning and development manager. And I will try to see, I don't know if you can see the color of difference, but I will try to see the amount of their brain available for the past, for looking at the past, and the other part of the brain available for the future. An accountant job is to analyze and understand what happened in the past years and the past months. And so most of his time is dedicated to looking backward. A consultant, tries to understand the past to better, understand the present and make recommendations for the future. Your job is to focus on maybe the present, to make sure that the current programs are going well, and to make sure that the future programs will be the best and will be designed in the best way with the best trainers and so on and so on. So you have a very little time available to look backward. And when we're talking about impact measurement, we're talking about looking backward. So no matter what you want to do, you have to keep in mind that there will be always in your work day very little time available for that. So because of that, we are going to talk about best practices about how learning metrics can positively impact the future, but we are trying to add being pragmatic, knowing that no matter what happens, you will have not a lot of time to do that. What can we do in this little time? I have 4 best practices to share on this first pragmatic part of my presentation. First, setting expectations before the program is designed saves attempting to justify the ROI, the return on investment, at the end. Second, focusing on the impact on the pilot session metrics ensures resources and time to adapt before the program rollout. Third, spending 80% of your time on the most critical 20% of your programs achieves the highest impact. And fourth, capitalizing on lessons learned ensures the success of future programs. So that's 4 best practices that I'd like to explore a little deeper with you. The first one, setting expectations before the program is designed saves attempting to justify the return on investment at the end. So I'm sure you know the Pragmatic scale. Probably many of you are aware of these return on expectation methods, and saying that there are 4 levels. I don't know if we see well that's the Pragmatic scale. Level 4, you want to measure the business outcomes, the impact for the company. Level 3, you want to measure the impact in terms of new behaviors, what people do, what they learn. Level 2, the learning, and level 1, the preference, what we call the satisfaction. Of course, in the end, you want to measure the business outcome. But what's important is that this work to define business objectives, behavior objectives, learning objectives, has to be done before the program. Before the program is even designed, when you're at the design phase, for 2 reasons. First, because your brain is available to that, because you're thinking about the future program, so you will have time to do that. Second, because your sponsors, your internal clients, all the stakeholders who gather together internally and externally to build a new program are also available. And you can agree with them about the objectives in terms of business, behavior, learning, and the chain of relationships between all these. So that's critical to do that before. And I'm sure all of you are aware of the Pragmatic scale and maybe are fed up to hear about it all the time. Well, I can bet that your internal clients can be, quality managers, sales directors, and so on. They don't know it. And I've seen in many occasions, I've been working on workshops, and in 2 minutes, I've explained, what is the Kirkpatrick scale to a sales director, to a quality manager, and there is, a sort of awareness suddenly appearing. They understand that when you talk about impact, this can be these different things, and if you don't define exactly what you want in each step, the program is likely to be a failure. So share it with your internal sponsors before the program, and you will see that it will actually improve the way they look at you and probably improve also the performance of the program. Second best practice is the pilot session. If we look at your time available, as I say, over the time is decreasing, and the quantity of information available about the performance of the program. Of course, the more you roll out the program, the more information you get. Well, we could say that there is an ideal phase, the pilot session. When you have only a few sessions that have been rolled out about the program, this is actually the right time to spend as much energy as possible to analyze all the data you have, satisfaction surveys, that's something useful, and also all the first indications about the potential impact of the program. Why? Because you have still a lot of time available, resources available to change the program, and it's still time. There is still time to change it, because if you know what to do after the last session, sadly it's too late. And this is also true for digital learning programs. Third, the 80-20 rule. That's very, very important. There's many things you can do about training evaluation. If I just show you an overview of the scope of what we do for our clients, we can gather expectations of the learners, the managers, do learning tests before, after, of course do satisfaction surveys, involve the trainers, and of course do a level 3, 4 evaluation, different ways with 360 evaluations, business outcomes. So there are many things that are possible. But you're not going to do that all the time for all the programs. As I said, you don't have the time. If you send surveys, if you gather data that nobody will ever look at, this is waste for the people who spend time, providing you with the data. This is waste for you, and this is probably bad for your image in the long term in the company. So you have to look for the leanest evaluation process for your programs. That will bring you the data you need and the data that you will be able to analyze. And then you focus on the 20% of the programs that are the most strategic, and this time you are more ambitious, and you can build something more complex for these strategic programs. For the rest, try something lean and simple that can be automated and rolled out on a very large scale. So for us, this means defining what we call an evaluation strategy. For compliance programs, what kind of evaluation process should be done? For language programs, what kind of evaluation do we need? For strategic program, leadership programs, what kind of evaluation processes have to be done, so that you know for each category of your programs what you should be done, and then you just have to customize it. Last, capitalizing on lessons learned ensures the success of future programs. As I said, analyzing the impact of a program is looking backward. So we could take the analogy of a driver, and analyzing the impact is, in a way, is looking at the rearview mirror, and in order to be accountable with your boss, with your internal clients, with all the company that finance the program. But there is something much more important, is the future. And the lesson learned from past programs have absolutely to be capitalized in your organization, so that you won't make the same mistakes over and over. And this is more difficult when the L&D managers change every 2 or 3 years, when you change providers every time. So the capitalization is actually, I think, something very difficult in our industry. And I remember I was in Belgium a few months ago, and I had a talk with a chief learning officer who said that he believed actually that this is the most challenging thing for himself, because he is managing a corporate university of a very large industrial company, and it's the company's policy to change the program managers every 3 years. That means a program manager will never design 2 leadership programs. never design two technical programs. That will be his or her successor who will do the next one. So you must find a way to keep all the lessons learned and to transfer that to the next team. So we've seen an overview of the pragmatic best practices that I wanted to share with you today. Now, let's look at the ambitious side. As I said, we are going to be today pragmatic and ambitious. For me, the ambition is to foster an impact-focused learning organization. And that's, as I said, we know that in the end we want our programs to be impactful. So how do we do that, knowing what we've seen today? There are 4 things I want to share with you. First, stop being obsessed by satisfaction. Second, measure learning impact in a scalable and flexible way. Third, ensure accountability. And fourth, be involved in the post-learning phase. So that's another series of 4 best practices, but this time to be ambitious and still pragmatic. So let's a quick look on each. Stop being obsessed by satisfaction. I have to confess that we evaluate probably 50,000 training sessions everywhere in the world. We work with companies all across the world, so our systems exist in 16 languages. So what I'm going to say is not specific to the UK, but common to all countries. So that means I'm sending 50,000 evaluation reports to my clients, satisfaction reports, and 3 months or 4 months later, impact reports. And I can track the statistics of how many people viewed each report. I can tell you that a satisfaction report will be viewed 4 times. An impact report will be viewed 0.7 or 0.8 times. So we know it's very important to measure impact, but naturally, because in the end we want that there's nothing bad about wanting the people to be happy, to have a great experience. The natural tendency is to focus on satisfaction. No matter what we do, there is a sort of the natural habit in our industry is to focus on satisfaction. So it's actually difficult to focus on impact. And it's not only about the analytics, it's the whole value chain of the learning that has to be rethought, I believe, from the design phase to the pilot to the analytics and the feedback to your internal sponsors. All of these have to be reinvented so that you talk about impact. And I can tell you that I have clients who have, it took them probably 1 or 2 years to abandon satisfaction in their dashboards, in the way they report to the HR teams, to the company's executives, to the internal sponsors. They just don't report the satisfaction. That doesn't mean they don't measure it. That means they don't report it. This is something that is kept internally. And what they report is anticipated impact, is the achievement of level 2, level 3 objectives, and overall the impact. And it's, of course, there are a few great things about that. First, just doing that improves the impact. Because everybody focuses, communicates about the impact, so in people's mindsets, progressively, everybody understands that this is what should be done. So people will design programs differently. And it's also, so we see different programs, and we also see a different way of the internal sponsors' involvement. So this is something difficult but very impactful in your organization. Second, measure learning impact in a scalable and flexible way. In each company we work with, we see hundreds, thousands of training programs, and the digital revolution makes it even, bigger and larger. Of course, you cannot organize a workshop for each program you will want to evaluate its impact. This is just not possible. As I said earlier, you want to have a customized approach for the most strategic programs. So what do we do with the others? Do we focus only on satisfaction? No. It's also possible to measure impact, but it has to be do something scalable and automated. And there are things that can be evaluated that can be applied to all the programs. First, application of new learning. Are people really using what they've learned on their job? This is something possible, and you don't have to spend hours working on a questionnaire and a way to measure that. For instance, what we do is that we ask participants just after the program what they intend to do. So they give their own words, they design an action plan, and they say, okay, I'm going to use these methods, I'm going to use this tool, and I'm planning also to change this behavior. So it's a written list of actions or intentions, and a few months later, the same participant will have to evaluate himself or herself, the same list, to see, okay, I did that, yes, or I did not do that. So it's an action plan defined by the participant and evaluated by the same participant and potentially by the manager. All of this can be, we do that for thousands of programs, for each client every year. It's automated. Same for the achievement of training objectives. They must be somewhere in your LMS. So you've done already the job. You have program objectives normally for each of your programs. So use them as a material for the impact evaluation. And ask people and potentially the managers to assess themselves, okay, in terms of level 2, level 3, level 4 objectives, are they achieved or not? And third, we also recommend to add generic questions in terms of improvements in the learner's performance so that you can benchmark internally and externally all kinds of programs with specific KPIs in terms of impact. And doing so, you can, the evaluation of learning impact is possible on a large scale without having you and your team spend too much time on it. Third, ensure accountability. That's something critical. You need to, in order to be impactful, you need to respond to all these questions so that you know who is in charge of analyzing the results. When and often. Is there an alert system for poor results? How is the information shared? I see people taking pictures. We have handouts of all this at our desk. But you can continue taking pictures, I don't mind, but just for information, we have handouts. So how is the information shared? Who should it be shared with? Which KPIs should be checked regularly? What will trigger an action? And finally, who is in charge of implementing the changes? This has to be defined for all the programs, and it has to be straightforward. People should naturally be able, everybody in your team should be able to say, okay, to respond to all these questions. So you know who is accountable for that. That is critical. Otherwise, it won't be done and people say it's because of my neighbors. Last, be involved in the post-learning phase. So, as I said, it's hard to focus on the past. But measuring the impact is useful for you to improve the programs, to set up a continuous improvement process for your all L&D organization, but it's also useful for the participants and their managers. So there is a way to transform the evaluation into a tool that will be beneficial for the learners and their managers. So the impact evaluation, if it's done properly, can be, of course, useful for you, but useful for them. It's not the 100th questionnaire they will have to fill out like every other functions in the company asking for feedback. No, it should not be seen that way. It's something that is first useful for them. And in a way, we see that the impact evaluation is one way for you to pass the baton to the local stakeholders that experience the program and in the end will benefit from the program if it's a success. Just to come back to what I said, to show you an example of what we do. So just after the program, we'll do the initial evaluation and we'll ask people, okay, exactly what I told you a few minutes before. What elements of the course will you be able to use? So that's one way of asking the questions. We can do it more, more sophisticatedly, but that's the basic form. And then, a few months later, all the responses will be integrated automatically in their second questionnaire. And they will have to think about what they've achieved or what they've not achieved. These words were, coming from the same person, but a few months before. And this and other feedback from the participants can be shared with the managers. This is actually very interesting for the managers that is manager. So here it's a management program. So the manager is a manager of managers, not an easy job, I can tell you. Knows that, okay, my team member is planning to use leadership tools. Well, maybe I know them. Maybe I've applied them. Maybe I can be helpful. Sorry. So it's actually precious feedback and precious information given to the participants and to their managers. We even do that for executive programs. To measure the performance of executive programs, we'll do that with the participants so that they commit to actions, they commit to changes, and they evaluate the actions and the changes a few months later. We won't ask their managers for feedback, because if we're talking about executive level, the level above, well, they won't respond to questionnaires. They don't do that anymore. But we'll share with them the intentions of their participants, and they love it. Even the CEOs of large companies love to see what their teams are trying to do in their jobs. And usually when executives spend one day of training, with, they don't call it training anymore, by the way. They don't want to use this word, but it's expensive. And if they spend one day, that means the CEO expects something out of it. So they love to receive that data. So all the impact evaluation process can feed the exchange and the communication between the participants and their managers. So that's it. That's what I wanted to share with you. Just a few more words about forMetris. So I created in Paris, but now we have teams in London, Milan, Casablanca, and Washington, D.C., where I live now. So we've evaluated 200 learning programs in 16 languages. So we've benchmarking analysis. We spend a lot in R&D, and we are very active in the UK. As I said, I didn't talk a lot about our solutions, but our stand is not very far away in T8. So if you want to continue the discussions, if you have any questions, any comments, please come. And as I said, there are handouts waiting for you there. Thank you very much.